In 1966, in a little town about 40 miles out of London, Southend-on-the-Sea in Essex in the UK, a band called the Paramounts had a hit with a song called Poison Ivy, but they couldn't follow it up, so then they disbanded. But out of the ashes of the Paramounts came a group that with their first single, it sold over 10 million copies worldwide, a smash all across the world. And many of you may think of them as a one-hit wonder because it's certainly their biggest hit. But they recorded 12 studio albums and one incredible live album. And so everybody wanted to know what the name of the group really meant. So if you're ready to turn a whiter shade of pale, then let's drop the needle on Procol Harum. Now, Procol Harum is one of those bands that is known more for their sound and their songs than the personnel, and that's because they change personnel so often that even I can't keep track of everybody who played in the band. But two people were really, really instrumental in the constants in the band, and that was Gary Brooker, who played organ and vocals and lots of other instruments in the band, and Keith Reed, who was their lyricist. The very first grouping of Procol Harum included Gary Brooker, Keith Reed, B.J. Wilson on drums, David Knights on bass, Richard Brown on guitar, and Alan Morris on organ. I'm not sure I can find a picture of that group because they broke up before they played any gigs. The next grouping found Matthew Fisher on organ, Ray Royer on guitar, Knights stayed on, and on drums was Bobby Harrison. But this new band needed a new name, and they were struggling to find one. And then they remembered they had a friend who had a cat with a weird name, so they called him and said, "What's the name of your cat?" And the answer that they heard was not the answer that the cat really was. The cat's name was Procol Harum. But what they heard over the telephone was Procol Harum. And that's how they got their name. I always thought harem had something to do with, well, you know. In 1967, the new band records their first single, and it's called A Whiter Shade of Pale. And as I said, it's a worldwide smash hit, selling over 10 million copies. It goes to number 1 in the UK and number 5 in the US. To support this smash single, the group went on tour in the UK, but their management really bungled it, and they were paid very little for the tour. As a result, a number of the members quit. B.J. Wilson came back on drums, and Robin Trower, who would have his own success later, came on as a guitarist. In September, they released their second single called Hamburg, and follow it up with their first album called Procol Harum, or Procol Harum. But the versions in the UK and the US, as is typical as we've seen in other episodes, are different. A Whiter Shade of Pale does not appear on the UK record, but it's the lead-off on the US. Also, the UK version has Good Captain Clack, and the US does not. Otherwise, the tracks are the same, but they're a little bit different order. I really like Conquistador, She Wandered Through the Garden Fence, Kaleidoscope, Salad Days Are Here Again, and Repent Walpurgis. In 1968, the band releases their second album, Shine On Brightly, and it has two covers, one for the UK and one for the US and Europe. I like the lead-off song, quite rightly so, the title, Shine On Brightly, and then there is a 17.5-minute epic, which kind of defines the band, In Hell 'Twas an I, containing glimpses of Nirvana, 'Twas Tea Time at the Circus, In the Autumn of My Madness, Look to Your Soul, and Grand Finale. Now, this album was a huge hit in the US, but it didn't even chart in the UK. As a result, the band toured the US extensively for the next few years. In 1969, they released their third album, A Salty Dog, and I really like this record. The lead-off is the great A Salty Dog. Then there's The Milk of Human Kindness, Too Much Between Us, Wreck of the Hesperus, and a rare vocal from guitarist Robin Trower, Crucifixion Lane. The album sold well, both in the UK and the US, and I know I played this record a lot on my radio shows in LA. But once again, the personnel changes inside the band, and when they released their fourth album, Home, in 1970, they got new members in the group. On this record, I like the lead-off Whiskey Train, Still There'll Be More, About to Die, Barnyard Story, Wailing Stories, and Your Own Choice. But this album can only reach 34 in the US, and it stalled at 49 in the UK. In 1971, the band is now a quartet, of course, with the lyricist Reed, and they release, if I can reach it there, that album there, Broken Barricades. I like Simple Sister, the title, Broken Barricades, Memorial Drive, Song for a Dreamer, and Power Failure. But when you listen to this record, you can tell that the band is going one direction and Robin Trower is going the other direction. And in fact, shortly after this record is released, Robin Trower breaks out on his own. In 1972, Procol Harum releases an incredible live album. This one right here with the Edmonton Symphony Choir and Orchestra up in Canada. And this is one of my favorite live albums. There's all great tracks, but standouts are the opener, Conquistador, A Salty Dog, and of course that opus, In Hell 'Twas an I. The album was a big hit. It hit number 5 in the US. And as typical with Procol Harum, there are personnel changes. So by the time their next album comes out in 73, it's a new group. The album is called Grand Hotel. I like the title song, Grand Hotel, Souvenir of London, Fires, Which Burn Brightly. Now, critics didn't really like this album, but it did reach number 21 in the US. Having used an orchestra on their last 2 albums, the band now decides, okay, we're done with that. And in 74, they release an album called Exotic Birds and Fruit. Check out the tracks Nothing But the Truth, Beyond the Pale, Fresh Fruit, Butterfly Boys, which was a dig at the head of Chrysalis, the band's label, and New Lamps for Old. Not a bad album, but it really struggled and it only could reach 86 on the US charts. For their next album, which would be their 9th album, actually, if you count the live one, they decided to do something different. And for the first time, they recorded cover songs of other artists, like the Beatles' 8 Days a Week and Lieber and Stroller's I Keep Forgetting. For their own original songs, give a listen to Pandora's Box and The Piper's Tune. In 1977, they released their 9th studio album, 10th again if you consider that live album, which they called Magic. Check out Something Magic, Skating on Thin Ice, Wizard Man, and on side 2 there is just one song, which is reminiscent of In Hell 'Twas an I. The song is The Worm in the Tree. Now this album did not sell well in the US or the UK, and as a result, a number of the band members decided to leave. And so the band itself decided, well, maybe it's time to disband. But like all groups in that era, sure, they disbanded. But 14 years later, they decide, let's get back together. They release an album called Prodigal Stranger. The lead off is Truth Won't Fade Away, All of Our Dreams Are Sold, and then there is a dream in every home. But the album didn't really sell, and Robin Trower decided he was done. But the rest of the band decided to go out and tour and try to support this album, and they did tour for a number of years. Even though they were touring, they didn't record their next album in 2003, and of course, there were personnel changes. And the album is called This Well's on Fire. The songs include An Old English Dream, A Robe of Silk, The VIP Room, So Far Behind, and Every Dog Will Have Its Day. But the album didn't sell well, but they continued to tour. But it's another 14 years till their next album comes out in 2017, and it's called Novum, and it's the first album that does not feature lyrics by their lyricist Keith Reed. Songs include I Told on You and Somewhere, but the album did not chart. Now, Gary Brooker was the only consistent member of Procol Harum from their beginning until he died in 2022, marking the end of the band. As usual, I've created a Spotify playlist, and the link is here, but I'll put it down in the comments below as well, so you can listen to these great songs, because obviously I can't put them up here on YouTube. Now, a lot of people think of Procol Harum as a one-hit wonder with A Whiter Shade of Pale, but when you really think about their career, they had over 55 years of creating some pretty incredible music, and that is very impressive. Thank you for watching, and if you ever get over turning a whiter shade of pale, then keep a rockin'. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.